Hello, good evening, and welcome everyone. We are so excited to have you here. I'm going to turn it over to Brittany Garcia, who is going to go through a few opening slides and we'll get right into our webinar. I'm Rain Rouse, and I'll further introduce myself in just a bit, but I'm so delighted to have y'all here on behalf of Dr. Veronica Ajawole and I, who are the directors and principal investigators for this wonderful Texas Southern University Baylor College of Medicine collaborative grant that's called BCM TSU P20 CURED. And our goal is to educate the community on clinical matters, research, community engagement, and really help everyone understand everything they need to know about cancer. As you can see from the title, today we'll be talking about nutrition, obesity, and cancer, what the community needs to know. And we have amazing guests and then a number of folks on here who may join in as panelists. So I will turn it over to Brittany Garcia.
Thank you, Dr. Rouse. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. Like Dr. Rouse said, the topic for tonight's event is nutrition, obesity, cancer, and what the community needs to know. So to start off, to start off for some general housekeeping, there will be a Q&A session at the end of the presentation, and so you will be able to ask your questions in the Q&A box. And so our moderator this evening is Dr. Rouse. So thank you so much for being the moderator this evening.
All right. So rather than read this introduction, I'll just tell you all a little bit about myself. So I'm a pediatric oncologist, and I'm also a physician scientist. And I was born and raised right here in Houston, Texas. From a research perspective, really work on trying to focus on difficult to treat blood cancer, specifically how to utilize the immune system to recognize and attack cancers. And so I've worked in the laboratory, I work with patients day to day, I lead clinical trials. And one thing that I've always been really passionate about is being an advocate and ensuring that we can dispel numerous health disparities that we have, particularly for patients seeking care for cancer. And that's both here on a local level as well as nationally. So I lead the Office of Community Outreach and Engagement at Baylor College of Medicine for our Comprehensive Cancer Center, and also for Baylor College of Medicine generally through our Community Engagement and Health Equity Office. And it's really important for us to ensure that the community has up-to-date, accurate access to cancer screening guidelines, treatment guidelines, and really that we're able to dispel a number of myths. And so we're excited to have you here tonight on behalf of Dr. Ajawole and I and our entire team. And we're going to jump quickly into our actual topic. Next slide, please. All right, so just to give you a little bit of background about this partnership between Baylor College of Medicine's Dan L. Duncan Comprehensive Cancer Center and Texas Southern University, of course, a historically Black college and university right here in Houston, Texas, is this was the only grant funded in the United States for this entire cycle. It is from the NIH and the National Cancer Institute and the Center to Reduce Cancer Health Disparities. And our goal, again, through this award is to have a collaborative alliance between our two institutions, not only for cancer research, but also for education and community outreach. And this includes training a diverse biomedical research workforce, supporting pipeline collaborative projects that we have some of our investigators on here today. Next slide, please. And so we have an amazing team. Again, I lead the team at Baylor College of Medicine, and I'm joined by a number of outstanding investigators. And Dr. Ajawole leads the team at Texas Southern University and has equally outstanding investigators. And this is a really exciting initiative, and we've been able to do a lot in the short period, in the short almost 2 years that we've had this award, and are looking forward to a lot more. Next slide. We give you this background because as we're doing these webinars and we have a number of different activities, we always want you to visit our link trees to see the different activities that we have. So this is our January webinar. We will have a webinar in February as well. And then we have a number of other activities that are either through this particular grant or that are sponsored by Texas Southern University through their Community Engagement Corps, or through Baylor College of Medicine through our community engagement and outreach initiatives as well. Importantly, you can click on the link in the chat box. This will be placed in the chat box throughout, or scan the QR code. If you know how to scan a QR code, you pick your phone up or your iPad and you can put it to the camera feature, and you can actually scan that code and it will take you to a survey to complete. This is for our community members. And if you are a community health worker, ensure that you sign in to receive your continuing education credits. This is really important, and there's a specific community health worker program evaluation. Next slide, please. And we'll again be putting this in the chat throughout. Also, there's the link. So I'm so excited, without further ado, to introduce my colleague and dear friend, Dr. Karen Riggins, MD, PhD. She is a gastrointestinal oncologist and physician scientist at Baylor College of Medicine, and she specializes in early onset colorectal cancer. So we've heard so much about individuals, even people that are famous, who have been diagnosed with early onset colorectal cancer occurring at a younger age than we typically expect. But she also is very interested in health equity and cancer care. She graduated from Spelman College, another HBCU. She went to Vanderbilt for her PhD in cancer biology, and then Morehouse School of Medicine for her MD, and then completed her residency at Vanderbilt and her HEMONC fellowship at Baylor. And again, her research focuses on colorectal cancer, but also on what we call epigenetics, which is the study of things other than just the environment, the study of our genetics, the study of different things that can impact our risk, and biomarkers, meaning things that can actually almost be a tip or a hint that something may be going awry, especially for minority populations with early onset colorectal cancer. And she also studies clinical trial diversity. She is a committed advocate for education, and she serves as the assistant director of inclusion within our Comprehensive Cancer Center, and also co-chairs our clinical trials diversity task force. So without further ado, Brittany, if you can stop sharing our screen, we will introduce the wonderful Dr. Riggins and allow her to turn her camera on and share her slides.
Good evening, everyone.
I'm so excited about this, Dr. Riggins, because this is the hot topic that everyone needs to know about. So I can't overstate how excited we are to have you. So I will turn it over to you.
Okay. It is great to be here. Thank you for entrusting me with such a important topic. Let me just load my slides, and I'm going to put it in presentation view. So we're going to spend the next 20 minutes talking about nutrition, obesity, and cancer in that order. And so we're going to focus on these topics. I am just going to pull out some key information that I think that you need to know in order to never need me as a clinician. My goal today is to give you and equip you and empower you with information that you need to avoid ever needing a doctor like me. So we're going to go through a discussion on food and nutrition. We're going to talk about obesity. We're going to break it down into the causes and the consequences of obesity. And then we're going to talk about the reality that we are what we eat. And we're going to talk a little bit about how foods are linked to cancer. We're not going to be so scientific that you can't understand, but there are a couple of key principles that I want you to know and walk away with. And then we're going to end with prevention and some healthy lifestyle tips. And so when we talk about food and nutrition, we have to begin at the beginning. Food is the center of many aspects of our daily living. So let's begin there. It is the most common cause for obesity. It stands as the center of many of our cultures. If you think about what Thanksgiving or gathering around family and friends means to you, there are usually a set number of memorable dishes that you can think of. And unfortunately for us in the US, many of those dishes are not as healthy as they could be. So food is a part of our culture identity. It's how we connect with people. It shows our traditions and our values, and it's a way that we express ourselves. It's also the center of our health, center of our culture, center of our health, because what we eat directly impacts our health. Our food is broken down to be the building blocks of our bodies. And if we are building with broken blocks, we have a broken body. Today, we're going to talk about food and nutrition in the context of being the center of cure, because there are things that we can do, we can be empowered to do to help change our conditions. Food is linked to chronic diseases, including heart disease, diabetes, and certainly cancer that we'll talk about. But let's begin here. So Houston, we have a problem. Food is a necessary part of life, but the diet that we have is optional. And for the US, we have by and large created this diet called the Western diet. And there are other countries that have adopted the same diet. And these countries, as well as the US, are associated with higher obesity rates because of what we are choosing to eat. So the Western diet is made up of a heavy consumption of processed meats, they're fried foods, dairy items, including butter, margarine, high-fat dairy foods, eggs, refined, that means processed grains, like the sugary cereals, baked goods, high sugar drinks. And on top of eating all the wrong things, we're not eating the right things, including fruits and vegetables. This is important because the Western diet in of itself has been linked to very serious medical conditions, including cardiovascular disease, which is a significant cause of death for us as a people, especially minority populations. So when I talk about cardiovascular disease, we're talking about hypertension, we're talking about heart attack, and we're talking about stroke. Not only is the Western diet shown to cause cardiovascular disease, but the Western diet has been shown to be linked to something called inflammation, which is your body under stress for a long time. That is linked to neurological brain problems, including dementia. There are other studies that have shown, and we will talk about this later, that the Western diet is linked to cancer by way of inflammation. And when you think about inflammation, just think about your body is stressed. So obesity is linked to the Western diet. It's not just in the US. Again, for those countries that have begun to adopt our unhealthy lifestyle, they also have higher rates of obesity. When we talk about obesity, it is a chronic disease of a person having too much fat in their bodies. We diagnose obesity by something called the body mass index. It is a calculation that clinicians, doctors can do, but you can actually do it as well. There are many websites you can go to calculate your body mass index. You just need to put your height and your weight in, and they will tell you whether you are underweight, a healthy weight, overweight, or obese. So and I encourage each of you to go ahead and do that, because this is going to be your first step in seeing where you stand. And so the normal body mass index is anywhere from 18.5 to 25. Anything less is underweight. Anything over is overweight and obese. When we talk about obesity, we're talking about this danger zone here with a body mass index or BMI of 30 and above. Why is this so important? Because it's common and it's costly. So our take home is it's common and it's costly. In 2020, there were, for every 5 American adults, 2 of them were obese. And obesity cost the country almost $200 billion in 2019. It is estimated that over 40% of Americans are obese. And if you look at this graph of the US, you can see that Texas is the lighter orange, meaning 30 to 30% of its population are overweight or obese. There also are patterns with obesity, and they are based on race. So for Caucasian and white individuals in the US, there are only 16 states or geographic areas that show that for white individuals in those areas, they had a body mass index of 35% or more. This is very different from African Americans. So for African Americans, there were 38 states showing that for African Americans, they were in the danger zone of 30 to 35, less than 35% or more. And for Hispanic, they were a little less than African Americans, but certainly more than Caucasians, with a rate of 34 geographical areas where Hispanics were in the danger zone. So this is an American culture problem. So let's get to the root of the problem. Obesity is not healthy because fat cells are not silent. Fat cells are active cells, and they are active cells that cause the body stress over time. Obesity is actually considered an inflammatory process. That means the excess fat in our bodies over time will cause inflammation and stress out our body and important organs, and that stress goes on to cause disease. So fat cells are not silent, they cause inflammation. This is just a picture, not to go into details, but just to show you, express to you, fat cells just don't take up space. They are speaking to the rest of our bodies. They are activating things with the signals that they release, and those activating signals go on to cause disease. When we talk about stress and chronic inflammation, so chronic stress over time, that leads to damage to our body's DNA, damage to the cell tissue, and then that's how we get all of the problems. So fat cells are not quiet. What causes this problem of obesity. We talked a little bit about eating too much high-calorie foods, not eating enough of the good stuff, fruits, vegetables, and fiber. But we also need to talk about physical activity. So that has been linked to obesity, not getting enough physical activity and exercise, being what we call sedentary, sitting down too long. Not getting enough sleep is also linked to obesity. Sometimes the medications that we are taking can cause us to gain weight. So if you suspect that to happen, this is just a conversation that you should have with your physician. So things like medications for depression, some heart medications, medications for diabetes, those are associated with weight gain. Some people have health conditions like issues with their thyroid gland that can cause obesity. And sometimes it's not your fault. You have genetic issues that will pass down with birth that will cause you to gain weight. Another important thing that we don't often talk about is the environment, and we'll go in that a little bit more. And stress and emotions can also cause obesity. We're not going to spend a lot of time here, but some things that cause obesity are out of our control. And this is a part of social determinants of health. So these are non-medical factors that affect your health. It can be where you were born, where you grew up, your workplace, where you live, and your age. These are considered like forces or systems that you don't have any control over that impact how you live and how healthy you are. These include things like how affordable your food is, how how safely you can get to a place where they even have healthy foods, your ability to be physical. This is another way to put it. So your grocery stores are important. So a person who has access, like a person in a high income neighborhood, they are 3 times more likely to be able to get the recommended foods that would promote good health. If you don't have enough green space in your community, you have a decrease well, an increased risk for obesity, but a decrease in the prevalence of the neighborhood tree density. So for developing obesity, it actually is a mirrored, there's a mirrored effect. And so for people who have family members that are obese, you are 60% more likely to develop obesity yourself. And for people who live in communities that are built to walk to your destinations, they have a lower rate of obesity. So let's connect the dots of what we've talked about so far. So the Western diet is the starting point because it leads to obesity. Obesity over time leads to inflammation because the fat cells are not silent. And with time, that inflammation goes on to signal to cause multiple problems throughout the body, including cardiovascular problems, diabetes, and of course, cancer, which is why we are here. So there have been many studies to show that cancer is linked to obesity. For many of the cancers that I treat, obesity is a risk factor for cancer. And so this is a nice schematic showing you all of the cancers that are associated with obesity. So most of the cancers in my clinic, like esophageal cancer, liver cancer, gallbladder cancer, pancreas, even renal cancer, those and rectal and colon. Those are associated with what you eat and being overweight. So you can impact your cancer risk by managing your body mass index. So managing your weight by way of managing your diet. I won't bore you with the details of how we think that cancer causes obesity, but there are very clear studies that have shown that being overweight, having these active, and I'm going to call them noisy fat cells that release signals to different organs to cause them to be stressed, proliferate, have DNA damage, all of those things lead to things like liver cancer, colorectal cancer, all the cancers we mentioned on the last slide. So the fat cells are not silent. Now we're going to transition into what we can do about the risk, because some of the power is in our hands. We can't fight against genetics. Sometimes we cannot fight against the environment, but there are things that we can modify to lower our cancer risk. And hopefully I've provided a thread for you in terms of this concept that food can cause obesity, which can cause inflammation. So the way that you can lower your cancer risk is to eat foods that lower inflammation. And so the foods that cause inflammation, you can see that on the right-hand side in orange. These are all of the foods that we mentioned in the westernized diet, and this is no accident. So fried foods, sugary beverages, red meats, processed food, carbohydrates, added sugars. So the Western diet is a pro-inflammatory diet, meaning it causes inflammation. Foods that fight inflammation are on the left in blue, and they are the healthier foods. Those are the things like fruits and vegetables. There are certain herbs and spices, certain meats like fish, nuts and seeds, olive oils, dark chocolate. All of these in studies have been shown to lower your body's inflammation. The other thing that we need to consider is the portions that we eat. And so there are many great resources online. MyPlate.gov is a great resource if you want to look at the portion sizes that they recommend. And then there are other groups that have adopted their own derivatives of MyPlate.gov. Here I just have from the Harvard School of Public Health. I do want to point out that there are some differences in these suggestions. The Harvard School of Public Health recommends healthy oils and more water consumption, while the MyPlate.gov does recommend daily intake of dairy products. But being empowered with information is the first step. I want to highlight one such diet that has been shown through research to lower your body's inflammation. And you may have heard about this diet. It's called the Mediterranean diet, and it is considered worldwide to be one of the healthier diets. So those Mediterranean countries like Europe, Italy, France. It is a cultural diet. And so initially, researchers saw that when people ate this diet, they had a lower cholesterol. But with more studies, we were able to see that this diet actually lowered inflammation in the patients who were on the diet. So it is a protective diet to reduce the amount of antioxidants we have to deal with, and it's considered a method to decrease your cancer risk and lower the risk of cancer in your life. So this is just a picture of the Mediterranean diet. So high with beans and olive oil, fresh fruits, vegetables, um, complex carbohydrates like grains, low refined sugar, lemons, and fish. So that is the primary part of this diet. There is a low intake of red meats and sweets, and just a moderate intake of dairy products and alcohol. So this is where we take charge. So what do we do with the information that we are given? How do we partner with our doctors and our healthcare to be a better person, to be a better patient? So the first thing I think is important is adopting a healthier lifestyle. Diet. We talked about the Mediterranean diet. We talked about the diet linked to low inflammation. Exercise. Stress does matter. So self-care, rest, minimizing alcohol, completely eliminating smoking, all of those things have been associated with lowering your cancer risk. And I would advise, if you check your BMI and you are in the obese categories, I would recommend that you schedule an appointment with your primary care doctor. You order these tests here, and I can repeat them at the end if anybody has any questions about that specifically. The other part of taking charge of your health is taking charge of the cancer screenings that we have in place. This is a preventable method. So there are many screenings that you may be eligible for women beginning at the age 40. You should be having mammograms. Liver cancer screening is indicated for people who have hepatitis B or cirrhosis. Colon cancer screening is indicated for anybody 45 years or older, or it might be younger if you've had a family history of colon cancer. Prostate cancer screening recommended for men over the age of 45, but this is one of the more controversial screening. And for patients who have had a smoking history, we do recommend a lung cancer screening on CT scan. So just talk to your primary care doctor about the screening that you may or may not need. So just going back to the main point. So we talked about nutrition, obesity, and cancer. Beginning at the beginning, the problem with us happens to be the food that we choose to eat. We have adopted the Western diet, high fat, high sugar, red meat, which leads to obesity. Obesity has been linked to inflammation because the fat cells are not silent. And this causes a host of problems, including cancer. So some of our cancer risk is highly preventable by modifications of our diet. So at this time, I'm going to pause and ask if you have any questions.
Thank you so much, Dr. Riggins. That was a wealth of information. And we are excited to open it up for questions. We have a couple that are in the Q&A right now. As a reminder, if you do have a question, go ahead and place it in the Q&A and we'll get those questions answered. We have plenty of time. So one of the questions, I'll start with this first one that's about how to determine the best organic food. So I'll just say there's a lot of information out there about what kind of foods are best to eat and if you need to only buy organic fruit and vegetables, for example, and different, kind of diets that sometimes are trendier or a fad. What is your take on the organic food craze?
Yeah, so I think organic foods are healthy because when you think about the processing of our fruits and vegetables, you have to think about pesticides, and pesticides can be what we call carcinogens, meaning cancer causing if you ingest them. And so they are a healthier choice. However, organic foods can be expensive. And so there is a balance you have to consider. If you're not eating organic foods, then make sure that you're washing your fruits and vegetables really well. There are always alternatives.
Absolutely. And sometimes people will say, nutritionists will say for fruits that have a hard outer covering,
Mhm.
right? So if it's a banana, if it's a kiwi, if it's fruit that is protected, the actual part that you're eating, then you probably don't need to worry as much about buying organic, but always recommending washing. And again, that's the reason behind seeking organic foods, is to avoid some of the practices like pesticides and what happens at different, fruit farms, et cetera. Another question, this is a good one about BMI. So you showed us the great BMI kind of scale. And fortunately, there are a number of tools where you can plug in your height and weight. You can calculate your BMI. There's been a lot of kind of chatter, even in the scientific world, about using the same standardized BMI that's based on a kind of a European ideal of a body type here in the United States and in different races and ethnicities. So someone asked, since body types differ, do we default to the lowest as healthiest? And so tell us a little bit about your thoughts on BMI.
Yeah, so the BMI is not, so we do BMI because it's not just a matter of weight. It's a matter of the distribution of the weight. And we know that abdominal girth, the more abdominal girth you have, it is associated with more cardiovascular risk and all of the disease pathology. So it's not just weight, it is the whole how your fat is distributed. And so we know that culturally bodies are built differently. And so I do agree that we probably should rethink the model, because the model is not necessarily equal for everyone, but the principle of the distribution of fat, the distribution of weight, that is a scientific principle. So the abdominal girth is what you want to focus on. There are a lot of things in medicine that do not lend to be culturally responsible. So we are working on it. But in the meantime, the
Absolutely.
main thing, and it's really a matter of that abdominal girth.
Absolutely. Thank you. Okay, here's a question about types of daily vitamins you recommend for people in general, and then specifically for women over 40. So if I said to you, you know, I'm going to the store and there's a bunch of different multivitamins, can I get the store brand? Do you recommend is D3 magnesium? Even on TikTok, even on social media, there are lots of trends about having to have certain vitamins. What's your recommendation? Do you recommend a multivitamin? Do you recommend that people who are not necessarily out in the sunlight a lot or may have darker skin take extra vitamin D? What are your thoughts on that?
So I think a multivitamin is good. It for me, it supplements the diet to make sure that you get all of the necessary vitamins that you need. Too much of a good thing is not good as well. Your body just really just urinated out, and so you're not saving up for a rainy day at all. But in terms of self-treating for vitamin D deficiency, there's a test for that. So I would say go see your primary care doctor, ask to have your vitamin D levels checked. If you need it, we can prescribe it. And so, yeah.
Exactly. And the same for all of the other vitamin trends that are going on. You know, too much of a good thing can be harmful. Okay, so remember, you all can put any questions in the chat. I'll ask a couple that are kind of, you know, hot topics. So there's a lot of interest in the scientific community, in the clinical medicine community, but even in the lay community about the microbiome of the gut and about how the different bacteria interact and about how and if you can actively change your microbiome. Tell us a little bit about your thoughts on what one can do, if it's the same advice as the general advice that you've given us, or if there's anything else. Like, do you recommend people take probiotics, for example?
I don't particularly recommend probiotics, but I do recommend really structured use of antibiotics. So anytime you have a cough, anytime you clear your throat, please don't run to the primary care doctor and ask for antibiotics
And
because
if you
every
go and they tell you it's a viral infection and you do not need antibiotics, please trust and listen to them. And tell us why, Dr. Riggins.
yes, because the microbiome is very important. And when you use antibiotics, you disrupt the microbiome.
And remind us what microbiome is.
So microbiome is really talking about the silent players in our health and our immune system. They are bacteria, mostly bacteria, millions of bacteria, and most of them line the GI tract. Within the microbiome, there are a few like yeast and other uh, microbials, but mostly bacteria. And these bacteria, we have, this is the fancy word, a symbiotic relationship, meaning you help me, I help you. And so the bacteria are there to help us. And there have been studies that link the health of your microbiome to cancer. There are studies that link the microbiome to colorectal cancer. Specific bacteria are identified, and at least pancreatic cancer as well. So the health of your microbiome is important. Like how many bacteria you have, how diverse, how many different types of bacteria you have. They are all linked to the health of your body, the amount of inflammation you have, and your cancer risk.
Such great information. Reminder, we have a real live GI oncologist here who speaks the language that we do, so you can put any additional questions in the chat. A couple more things. So we all know, and you touched on this, that it often is more expensive to buy healthier foods. Foods that are, we talked about organic foods, foods that are kind of whole foods, foods that are less processed. It's often cheaper to buy processed foods if we think about the cost of a meal at a fast food restaurant versus the cost of a meal at a restaurant that, you know, only uses organic and fresh ingredients. If we can think about how even within anyone's budget you could make wiser choices. If you just give us a couple of examples, if like starting tomorrow, if I said that no, I have to go to McDonald's, that's what my kids eat, that's what we're going to eat, that's on my budget, what are some examples of how I can make a healthier choice even at a fast food restaurant?
Yeah. So convenience is cheap now, but it will cost you later. So I think the purpose of uh, you can do it. Like you can live healthy, eat healthy on a budget, but you just have to be very intentional and you have to plan. So maybe the fresh vegetables or the fresh fruit are expensive. Go to the frozen section and see
Exactly.
it's cheaper to buy
And it's
frozen
just
section.
as nutritious. It's just as nutritious. Those frozen fruits and veggies are actually quite nutritious. So it is
Yeah.
cheaper. But if I had to go to McDonald's, if I had to go to a fast food restaurant, most places are attuned to the fact that they have to have some healthier items on the menu. So there are
Yes.
actually salads. There are choices for apple slices rather than French fries. Let's talk about portion size. You showed those plates, right? In
Yeah.
general, our portion sizes are quite large.
Yes, the serving sizes when you go to different restaurants are not portion controlled. So you have to be mindful of that. And so the way that you are mindful of that is actually doing your research and then applying it at home. Because if you know what a cup of rice looks like in your plate, then you'll know that they gave you 3 cups of rice when you go to the restaurant. So when you are embarking on this journey, you need to plan. There are many online aids that can give you healthy recipes. So you plan the recipes that you want. You go to the grocery store and buy those items. And also, when you're at the grocery store, look at the ingredients, look at the amount of added sugar and compare. That costs you nothing to look and pay attention. They used to say anything in a box coming in a box, like like the pastas and all of those things, those are generally not as healthy as they could be. So avoiding those types of things. If you eat cereals, compare which one has the least amount of sugar, which one has more fiber. Make healthier choices that way.
Absolutely. This is a really good question that one of our amazing community members asked is vitamin D deficiency or the lack of vitamin D related to colon cancer? I have seen so much about this in the last couple of years. Tell us what the actual data is. Tell us what the facts are. And I think kind of help us put this in context.
Yeah. So there have been many, if you do a literature search about vitamin D, you do a literature search about vitamin C, vitamin A, there have been many studies that show varying things. So one study will show it is decrease the cancer risk, and one would show there's no benefit. So that's why we don't make recommendations to supplement vitamin D in order to reduce risk. So there is data to support additional use of like vitamin D and folic acid and vitamin B, but there's also data to the contrary.
And I think that's so important because often when research about these things is released, it's released in a vacuum and does not necessarily take into account prior findings that may be contrary. And I think what you're also just honing in on is that most people will recommend that it's perfectly acceptable and healthy and often recommended to take a multivitamin, right? To supplement your healthy habits. And those multivitamins are calibrated to have an appropriate amount and tells you the percentage of the daily value that you should be taking. And so this is not for people that are deficient. Remember, we have the ability to test for these vitamins in your bodies. So we're not, overtly recommending that everyone just go out and take a whole bunch of supplements. But that is a question that I have been asked by so many people. So I'm so glad that we had you here to answer it. All right. Well, we have about 10 minutes left. We have time for one or two more questions. If there are any questions from the audience.
I do want to say this because we talked about supplements a lot.
Yeah.
If you are using a supplement that's not like the traditional over-the-counter multivitamin, please bring that supplement to your doctor because sometimes the way that supplement is broken down can interfere with the medications that you are taking. It can cause liver dysfunction. So please, if you're going to buy something online, especially if it's something,
do not hide it. Do not hide it from us. We want to know. We are not going to judge you on it. We want to know the purpose of asking about additional supplements. And we also know that from a cultural perspective, there will often be different teas or different foods or different supplements and things that may be organic and from the ground, and or things that you buy that it may tell you what the active ingredient is but not have a lot of data about the other stuff. We have actual pharmacists like Dr. Ajawole, who I work with here, is a pharmacist, and several of our other folks on here who can check the ingredients and help us understand if it's going to interfere with other medications and make them hang around longer in your body, and potentially cause organ problems. So please always tell us about any supplements. Okay, here's another good question. This question is, we talked a lot about inflammation and obesity causing inflammation, and also inflammation having a downstream effect and leading to cancer. For polycystic ovarian syndrome, for example, or I could also say maybe thyroid. These medical problems that can lead to obesity and cause inflammation and make it a bit harder to lose weight when you are overweight or obese. How do you suggest people tackle that? You gave us some insights about, talking to your doctor about the medicines that you're on. And it may be that despite how hard you're trying to eat healthy, you may still have problems with losing weight. So what are some suggestions you have?
Well, so that's not necessarily my area. So
not GI. Okay, yeah, we can.
I would say no, but if you are, so you're first and foremost, you're under the care of a clinician for these conditions. Okay. And so they can work to optimize the medications that you're on.
Yeah.
And that would help with weight loss. But if you're struggling, let them know and let them know that that is your goal so that they can optimize the treatment, the management.
Got it. And the thing about it is
even if you're having,
go ahead.
So I was going to say, even if you're having issues with losing weight, the principle of a healthy diet should still be, you should be practicing the principle of a healthy diet, lowering your inflammation.
But the health risks of the health benefits of a healthy diet go beyond obesity in itself. And a number of things like polycystic ovarian syndrome, sometimes if you are overweight, losing weight can actually improve it. So there, I mentioned that, and I mentioned like hypothyroid because there are a number of medical conditions or people who have to be on long-term
Mm-hmm.
steroids or other medicines
Mm-hmm.
that do cause you to gain weight, especially in the belly area. You
Mm-hmm.
know, it does not change the fact, and it's even more important in those situations to practice a healthy lifestyle and really also try to increase your activity level if you're
Mm-hmm.
able to. Okay, we'll do this one as the last question. This is a really good one that is a complex question. But what role does genetics play in obesity? And it's complex because we know that there are things that may run in your family like diabetes or hypertension, but then we also know that there are lifestyle things. And I know you study epigenetics too. So the role of genetics in obesity itself versus the role of genetics in other medical conditions that are also linked to obesity.
So we mostly see it in genetics related to mutations that are associated with diseases.
Right.
So um, in that manner, not there's a well, there are certain obesity genes like the OB gene that if you've ever Googled that, those mice are pretty plump that you would see. So there are definitely genes related to obesity, and those are hormonal that more like the leptin gene, which is a signal for your body to let them know whether or not you're hungry. But I think in terms of genetics and obesity, it's more related to obesity by way of medical conditions.
Exactly. All right. Well, that was a great question to end this on. Thank you all so much for everything. I'm going to invite Brittany back to advance to, we have a couple more slides. And we did have some questions of whether these slides will be available in PDF format. I answered for you, Dr. Riggins, and said you would be happy to share these slides if that's okay with you, of course,
Yes.
with credit to you. So we'll make sure that we get these slides out to everyone. And so just in closing, again, here's the QR code that you can also scan. I know some people were having trouble with it in the link, and Brittany posted a new link. If you have trouble after this, you can reach out to us and we can make sure that we get the survey to you so that you're able to especially complete the survey, because we always want to hear your feedback to improve. And then also for our community health workers who need to get their credit and their program evaluation. We will have our next webinar in February and have information about that too. And as part of this collaborative initiative, we also have a wonderful cancer research education program where we have partnered with Texas Southern University and Baylor College of Medicine, and we have TSU undergraduate and graduate students who can participate in our summer research program. So the applications are live. If you happen to know any students at TSU who may be interested, please share the word with them. We had our first cohort of students last summer. It was very successful. These students get to work in research labs and in different research experiences with mentors like myself and Dr. Riggins, and it's a really great opportunity. Next slide. And so here is the information on our upcoming webinar. So the next webinar is on Wednesday, February 12th, same time, 6 p.m. to 7 p.m. Remember, you do have to pre-register like you all did for this. So you can scan that QR code or through the link and pre-register. That one is going to be on taking control of your personal cancer risk, impact of family, lifestyle, and environmental factors. So we're staying on this same kind of route about talking about things that maybe we can't change and talking about things that we can. And we talked a lot about some of the lifestyle modifications we can make. And I know that there is a lot of interest on environmental factors, especially in Houston and surrounding areas, but also your family risk, right? Like what you can't necessarily control versus what you can control. It's important to have all of that information. Next slide. And Texas Southern University has a wonderful community engagement core that's through their funded CBMHR, and they will have maternal and child health education and outreach that's on January 24th. So coming up, they're going to provide lunch. It's free. It's open to the public. Sounds like something that everyone needs to attend, and it's in person. It's at the School of Public Affairs. All of the information is there. We know that we are very interested in maternal and child health, and especially in racial and ethnic minorities in our area. And you can scan that QR code, and also the link, I think, is in the link tree as well. We'd love to have y'all there. And again, there will be community health worker credits. And then we have the clinical engagement and clinical research and engagement conference. I think this is the 3rd annual or maybe 4th annual, which is an amazing event put on by Texas Southern University. We often have speakers from even Baylor College of Medicine, from all over the United States, and we talk about clinical research, and it's a community-driven event. So really demystifying some of the misperceptions and addressing questions. And so please, please, please come out to join us at that. That will be amazing. I will definitely be there. Next slide. I think that may be the last one. So thank you all so very much. Please join us in our upcoming events. Please fill out the surveys and give us feedback. And community health workers, please don't forget to do your credit. Thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. And a big thank you to Dr. Riggins. Huge thank you for Brittany, Nkechi, and the TSU Constellation X team. Thank you so much.